Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. This is all about ASCII Doc. This is a stretch assignment for Health Informatics, and it was prepared by Stephen Smith. So as you can see here, there is a lot to this presentation. I'm going to be covering things like what is ASCII Doc, what is it used for, the differences between ASCII Doc and ASCII Doctor, what companies or organizations currently use ASCII Doc. Can I use ASCII Doc even if I'm not a good coder? How do I convert ASCII Doc to a PDF? How do I add an image? Is there a way to add a watermark or a logo to each page of an ASCII Doc? How to add a table of contents, embed or add a table, style sheets, utilizing JavaScript, and how to use ASCII Doc with GitHub, as well as bonus material. So what is ASCII Doc and why do we use it? So one way to think about it is a plain and simple markdown text that allows users to focus on writing content first. And it eliminates GUI dependencies. A lot of people don't like getting bogged down when they're trying to write their thoughts with, say, using Microsoft Word and having to go, okay, where do I go in here to format this and do all this? This solution allows people to use their favorite text editor. Think about solutions like Sublime, or in this presentation I'll use just basic Notepad, but you could also use Notepad++, VS Code, etc. And really what's cool about this solution is it allows you to generate PDFs in good-looking HTML. So common questions newcomers might ask is, is there a difference between ASCII Doc and ASCII Doctor? I found a good resource that answers this question that says that ASCII Doctor is a fast, open source text processor and publishing toolchain for converting ASCII Doc context to HTML5, DocBook, PDF, and other formats. So ASCII Doctor is written in Ruby and runs on all major operating systems. So think about the ASCII Doctor as being the text processor, and ASCII Doc is what is the engine that'll convert to different formats that you want. Think about companies and organizations that currently use ASCII Doc. I'm sure there are a lot more than the ones that I found and cited, but companies like O'Reilly, MakerPress, and a magazine called NFJS already use ASCII Doc almost exclusively. And then the third question is, can I use ASCII Doc even if I'm not a good coder? I will say enthusiastically, absolutely you can, but some of the things that I cover in this presentation would probably require somebody to have an open mind and a lot of patience with themselves to learn quite a new number of capabilities, particularly once we go into the more advanced things like incorporating JavaScript into ASCII Doc. So one thing I wanted to include is how do you install and run ASCII Doctor? Basically, while I was creating this presentation, I wanted to be able to install and run all these capabilities myself so I could see as I'm learning, so I'd be able to give a presentation and teach other people about it. So there's many resources for this, and here's a quick rundown. The first thing that I did is I downloaded and installed Ruby for Windows, because for this solution I'm actually using Windows. You open the Windows PowerShell, so you do that just by going to the run command and type in PowerShell, and you run commands to verify Ruby and Gem are installed. And basically you have to download Ruby and Gem. Also in PowerShell, enter Gem installer ASCII Doctor. And so if you do install ASCII Doctor, that'll actually create that installation using the Gem installer feature from the Ruby installer that you download from, just try Googling it. The Ruby installer for Windows is what I Googled to get to that. And then once ASCII Doctor is installed, just type ASCII Doctor on the command line to launch it. And another thing that I discovered is changing directories to the user document folder. So a lot of times somebody will have a particular folder that they want to reference. So in Windows, just try going CD documents in PowerShell and that'll take you there. Additionally, see if any ASCII Doctor files already exist by typing dir and then the star and .adoc in PowerShell, and that'll actually give you a list of all of those. But say that you want to create an ASCII Doctor file, what you'll do, and in this example, is open your favorite editor from PowerShell, like Notepad, and then create your document with ASCII Doc syntax, which I'll cover some of the things that you can do throughout this presentation. And what's key, if you do use Notepad, I wanted you to know about is save the file as a .ADoc, but then there's a second drop-down box in Notepad that defaults to .text. Go ahead and use the drop-down and choose all files. Otherwise, it's going to end up saving it as some file.adoc.text. So just a little word to the wise, a good thing to do there. I made this visualization that gives you an overview of some of the really powerful features of being able to make PDFs in HTML. The game plan is you as the user use a text editor like Notepad and then create your ADoc file, and just how I've described before, and then in PowerShell I'm going to show you ways that you can use ASCII Doctor to create an HTML file or use it to create a PDF. So let's go through this. How do you convert an ASCII doc to a PDF? Well, I discovered that first in PowerShell you enter this command that I'm going to give you to install the PDF capability. Again, you've installed Ruby, and so you also have the gem installer. So just type on the command line gem install ASCII Doctor -PDF. Now the instructions that I followed --pre is because at the time the video resources I found that gave me this solution were offered. That capability was in pre-production. You can do this, I've tried it, it works, but you may also want to consider trying gem install ASCII Doctor -PDF and see if that works, because I would imagine it may not be in pre-production any longer. Then from PowerShell you cd to the document folder where your .adoc file that you've created is saved, and then enter ASCII Doctor -PDF star.adoc. What that command is going to do is save every .adoc file in the directory that you cd'd into as a PDF. Keep in mind that one takes a little bit longer to render, but I did also want to include bonus material, which is how do you convert an ASCII doc to HTML. Turns out that's really fast. In PowerShell, you cd to a directory where the ADoc file or files are that you want to convert, and then at the PowerShell command line, enter ASCII Doctor star.adoc, and it just immediately renders beautiful HTML, and that's why I wanted to add that as a bonus feature in this presentation. Third, type dir star.html, and you can verify that there are HTMLs created in the directory that you're in. And then if you want to open that HTML file from the command line, just enter // and then the name of the file, so like sample.html, for example. How do you add an image? Within the ADoc, you can reference an image file using syntax that I'm going to show you on the next slide, but I also wanted to point out a bonus feature that I discovered in researching for this presentation called ASCII Doc Image Helper. And that's an Atom plugin that facilitates insertion of images in an ASCII Doc document. And there you can create an image file in the specified folder, like cding into your documents folder, that's named after the ASCII file doc it's pasted into. This was really good information that I found, and with all of these slides, be sure and take a look at these references that I've listed, because you'll be able to find all of the source content that I'm talking about. There's other features that you can add, like is there a way to add a watermark? There actually is, and I had to do a little bit of digging for this, but within the ADoc file that you're creating, there is some sample syntax which I found below, where you enter 4 forward slashes, and then you could have a title, and also notice that it's referencing a PDF page size, so you could play around with those parameters. But the important thing is the third line down where it says page-background-image, and then image :confidential.png. That's how another way within the syntax of ADoc that you can reference an image just using that within that ASCII Doc document. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, entering all of this code here will show you how to be able to create some sort of background image. With this example, of course, that would be some sort of confidential.png image that I might have found on the web or created in Photoshop and added it to that directory. Table of contents is kind of cool, and I wanted to give you sort of a generic syntax ASCII Doc code user can add into their ADOC file, where you would just have a colon TOC colon, and then you can add features, and then you like I just put blah 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 blah, but then you could have you know, dash 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 dash, add more stuff, etc., dash dash dash, etc., etc. So you can actually construct a really pretty looking table of contents quite easily, just using a little bit of syntax that you have to pick up. Creating a table. Now this one's kind of interesting, and it probably would take a little bit of getting used to. One thing I would recommend is having a cheat sheet handy, so if you're writing one of these documents, you'll know how to get the syntax correct. But this is a good overview of using pipes, names of columns like 1, 2, and 3, and then following up with cells in columns 1, 2, and 3, row 1, cells, columns, rows 2 for 1, 2, and 3, and so on. This is the way that you can do it, and it will generate a really nice looking table for you just using the syntax within ASCII Doc. Now we're going to get into things that are a little bit more complex, which is using Style Sheet Factory. Quotation that I got about style sheets in Style Sheet Factory is the ASCII Doc Style Sheet Factory are built using Compass, which is a CSS authoring framework that uses Sass to generate CSS files. The styles and components are generated by Foundation 4, which, as this article showed me, is an awesome and flexible CSS component framework that ensures your style sheet is cross-browser and mobile friendly. There are some more gem install required. So just remember that we did install, I showed you earlier how to install Ruby and gem, and then I also included screenshots where you can actually do some gem installs. Please take a look at my reference at the bottom left hand corner, because that'll show you some of the step-by-step gem installs that you would do. But if you want to actually build style sheets, you can navigate to ASCII Doc Style Sheet Factory directly on your system. This one, the examples I found, it looks like it may be easier to implement Style Sheet Factory in a Linux environment. And then if you wanted to create an ASCII file like the one below, I gave you a sample ADoc where they have an introduction to ASCII Doc, Doc Writer, Doc Example, and so on, some sort of a preface. Then it has the syntax for first section along with items 1 and 2, source Ruby, and then there's a little bit of Ruby script in there that says puts hello world. Again, if you wanted to be able to use existing CSS style sheets, you could navigate to a folder where you might already have some CSS styles that are saved using the ls command. And then you could apply, for example, the screenshot here shows the colony CSS style sheet to create a sample document. The way that you do that is navigate to the directory where you've got your sample ADoc, call the ASCII Doctor processor, and then specify the style sheet you want to apply, like I mentioned here, colony CSS, and then tell the processor where the specified style sheet is located with the styles dir attribute. So I had mentioned earlier, for somebody that's just getting into ASCII Doc, is there a lot of programming required? No, but as we start getting into things like style sheets and as the discussion continues, you'll see that things get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more involved, more things to actually install to make that work. But yes, you can use existing style sheets, particularly for HTML or PDF rendering using CSS. So an even more advanced feature would be using ASCII Doc and JavaScript. And I did quite a bit of research on this and discovered that to be able to do that, it's going to require some front and back end development. So again, I go back to my admonition earlier. Yes, now that we're getting into this stuff, if you weren't comfortable with coding, this may be a place where you stop. But if you wanted to persevere, it's not incredibly difficult. I've provided some great reference material, and this option would probably be, again, easier in Linux using npm to install front-end packages. I even gave the sample command that you would do to npm install the ASCII Doctor.js -save. Then I added a line that you would add to the HTML page that would be able to reference that ASCIIDoctor.js. I also included ASCII Doctor brings ASCII Doc to the JavaScript world. It was a screenshot from a reference that I've listed below that has some really good information on how they've used Opal to transpile ASCII Doctor, which is a modern implementation of ASCII Doc from Ruby to JavaScript to produce ASCIIDoctor.js. Lots of good information here. I also want to talk a little bit about the back-end stuff that you would want to do. Notice that we've got an instantiation of the ANI-doctor.js library. We're converting ASCII.doc content to HTML5 using ASCIIDoctor.js, and we're printing the HTML5 output to the console following the 1, 2, and 3 that I listed in this screenshot. Using ASCII Doc with GitHub. I've got some great advanced resources that I've provided at the top, and including the HTML page there, which is really quite good. And I also discovered a fairly new feature called GitHub ASCII Doctor Upgrade, and it provides upgrades and a lot of extra features that really make using ASCII Doc with GitHub as an alternative to using Markdown instead. Once you start using this, and as I'm learning this, I'm really realizing that ASCII Doc can provide much more superior and better looking documentation than simple Markdown docs would. So features of that would include source code syntax highlighting, which is great for showing off code feature improvements. The example I saw, it looked like that they had made some slight changes to a function, and they had added some syntax to be able to show that off in bold. You could also be able to add a document title and footnotes. There's a feature that if your security protocols will allow, where you can swap an include for a link, which I thought was cool. Also, an improved syntax features or sugar that you can add that really add a lot of pizzazz that will make ASCII Doc a superior solution for writing documentation in GitHub so much better than Markdown. And of course, it has some expanded or enhanced table of content features. So the exciting conclusion here is that yes, using ASCII Docs in GitHub is as easy as creating Markdown files, but the features ASCII Doc offers with its expanded syntax is far richer than Markdown. I also wanted to include, as I conclude this presentation, some additional bonus material, and this would be one of many screenshots that you would probably want to have as you're diving into learning and mastering the syntax associated with ASCII Doc. Here's a cheat sheet that you can use for good reference, but there's tons of resources out there. And chances are, I think what you'll find is there's just a few things, lists, bullet points, and some other miscellaneous features that you'll find that once you've entered that, and what I discovered is that it doesn't take much to render a really beautiful looking document. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to my presentation. I hope this was helpful for you. It was awesome for me to be able to go through this and learn so much about a capability that before today I didn't know anything about. So thank you for your time.